When I speak at summer camps, my family usually comes along. We've been doing this for years now. My wife and I have noticed something that changes about our kids every time we take them to camp. They suddenly don't need much stuff anymore. When they were younger, they'd invent games out of rocks and cardboard and mud and sticks. Now that they're older, they hang out with the adults. They sit and watch the wildlife or just enjoy nature. They seem perfectly content. We never hear, "I'm bored." They hardly ever fight about what they do or don't have. Years ago, we got home from a week at camp. A fight broke out in the basement about some important toy. My wife questioned my oldest daughter about what was going on. Her response, "Things are more confusing here. There's a lot more stuff, and it makes it more complicated and confusing." Wisdom from the lips of an 8-year-old that perfectly illustrates the importance of another of the spiritual disciplines, simplicity. In the spiritual sense, simplicity has been defined as seeking the one thing. In other words, keeping first things first and second things second. Many Christian thinkers have called it living out of the divine center. In a more concrete sense, the discipline of simplicity means asking some tough, practical questions. Are my days too full or overscheduled? How many activities, sports, and clubs do my kids need to be involved with? Are all the technologies and modern conveniences that I own really necessary? And this discipline forces us to ask even bigger questions. Why do we live the way we do? Why do we keep living at such a fast pace? What would happen if we stopped and did things differently? What deep inner desires or insecurities or needs are being satisfied by a lifestyle of plenty and busyness and complexity? And the really big question, how do we forge a new way of life, a kingdom way of life? What does a life of simplicity really look like? Simplicity begins with learning to be content, not something our culture is known for. Contentment means that we are not always looking for the next thing we need or the next great thing to buy. It means being okay where God has placed us and living with the things we already have. Some friends of mine used to live together in a house. They made a deal with each other about buying stuff. If they had an impulse to buy something, they had to wait 3 days. After 3 days, if they still felt like they needed it, then they could go ahead and get it. If not, they take the money they would have spent and place it in this huge water jug in the living room. The money eventually would be given away to a charity of their choice. Using this system, these friends rarely ended up purchasing what they first thought they needed. They gave away thousands of dollars. A simple lifestyle is developed when we learn how to say no. And that applies to more than just spending money. My wife's professor of theater was a simple man. He lived a full life, caring for and making an impact on many students' lives. Years ago, he shared one of his secrets with me. If he was going to say yes to something new in his schedule, he had to be willing to say no to something else. This simple practice kept him from overloading his life. So many of us just keep saying yes to new things without realizing that our time is limited. We turn our lives into a rat race and never allow ourselves to slow down and just live. The discipline of simplicity means that sometimes we have to say no to some really good things. I have a crawl space in my house. It's full of stuff we've accumulated over the years. My wife and I recently headed down to clean it up. It was packed full and an absolute mess. While we were down there, we found boxes that had been there since we moved in 4 years ago. They had never been touched. We found stuff that we'd purchased and used once or twice and then put away. As we looked over all the junk we'd packed away, we agreed. We simply didn't need most of it. We either gave it away or threw it away. Maybe this is the best way to understand what the practice of simplicity looks like. We all need a good house cleaning. That includes our basements and crawl spaces, but more so, our schedules and our spending habits. A cluttered life can get in the way of seeking God's kingdom. By ridding ourselves of excess, we become free to focus our attention first and foremost on God. Jesus said it this way, "Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you as well. Is your life cluttered, chaotic, and packed too full of good things? This week, focus on learning to say no. Practice simplicity and see how clear God's direction becomes.